our presentation. We've been working really hard on to present you guys with the most efficient nutrition education about protein. So stronger, longer, the role of protein in healthy aging. So before we dive into the science, I kind of wanted to frame the discussion as something that we can think of nutrition as preventative care. So what a lot of what we call in Western medicine in the United States focuses on acute care. So that's treating our signs and symptoms that we show up to at the doctor's office, and they treat us with that disease state that we already kind of have. But the nice thing about nutrition is that it's something that we can add to our tool belt each and every day. And then we can think of it as our preventative care. So thinking of it as investing in your health. And protein is a great thing to focus on here. It's about keeping our muscles healthy, our bones healthy, supporting our immune system, and then we want to delay or prevent any age-related issues that might come about. So throughout this presentation, you guys are going to get to see just how proper protein intake can be a foundational strategy for a strong life, and that let's get into it. So just a little session preview. We're just going to go hit on the role of protein in healthy aging, kind of what even is the role of protein in our body, and then the benefits of protein. How much protein do we actually need? There's a lot of different information out there. Protein quality and types, food sources of protein, meal timing and planning. Protein and changing any kind of nutritional status can be a little bit challenging for us. So we're going to go over some barriers that you might encounter in your journey of consuming protein, and then some solutions for you guys. So, and then we have a little fun little recipe surprise at the end. So this first slide, we're going to drop a question in the chat for you guys to answer. So about how much protein do you think someone should be consuming in a day? And while you guys do that, I'm going to go over some common myths that we're going to debunk in this presentation today. It's kind of a lot of information out there in the media, especially right now with protein. It's kind of a craze. So the first one just being that too much protein makes you bulky. This is actually false unless you're incorporating some intense strength training or you're incorporating that super high intake of protein. You're not going to counter that. And you're going to get to see in just a minute about the importance of consuming protein in our diet, and that it actually is more important than just our bulking or what we see a lot with like bodybuilding. The second thing being aging adults don't need much protein. As we're talking about, the synthesis of this whole entire presentation is about healthy aging. And so we actually do have an increased need as we age. So we're going to get into that today. I don't need protein if I'm not physically active. Again, the biological function in our body, we need food to fuel us. And protein, since it is so complex and it has so many different roles, we do need protein, even if we're not thinking of ourselves as like the football team out there on a Saturday. We still need protein. This next one, plant proteins aren't good enough. This is a huge one. I think we often think of protein as something that's just an animal product, or we think of the supplement in our head. And rather thinking, we're going to debunk this today, that we can get enough of our protein source from plants. So if you're a vegetarian or vegan out there, do not fret. We have solutions for you. And we're going to get into the science behind that. And then the last one, I think this is a pretty common one. You need protein immediately after workout or it's wasted. While it is important, protein is essential for kind of refueling our muscles as we do kind of put strain on them in a workout, but that noting the muscle recovery process actually is about 24 to 72 hours after we work out. So you do have time to get that protein in, and we can spread it out so that we actually reap the benefits and we don't cause any digestive stress. So I see that you guys in the chat have kind of put some of your goals, and these are great guesses, and we're going to get into just about how much you need. We see like 30, 60, 80 to 100. These are awesome. So hold on to those for just a moment. The next thing I wanted to hit on before we get into recommendations is the protein craze. Even as a nutrition student, oftentimes when I think of protein, I think of the supplement aisle at the store, just because that's what's being marketed to us every day. So we have protein shakes, we have protein chips. I've even seen protein water. I know Starbucks even came out with protein coffee. So it's marketed to us that we have better health with protein, we have better workouts, we have better body composition, but really, is there science behind that? And so when we go to the store, we see all these options and we're being marketed and the way they look, the way they taste, that we need them over food. So what's interesting is that a lot of that doesn't necessarily come from science. A lot of it is companies wanting to market their own product to profit off of things that kind of like these deficiencies that they create for us. And that we really, in the hopes of this presentation, I really want to share with you guys kind of that the whole food source of protein is an awesome way, and we can reach our needs of protein every day through that. So I know it's kind of overwhelming when we get to the protein bar aisle. Like, why are there protein bars that have 40 grams of protein? And then we have protein bars that only have like 12. And then there's name brand bars. And then there's the store brand bar. Like, what is the difference in all of these? And, how do we combat that on our own in order to allow ourselves to fully feel confident when we enter the grocery store, but also that we understand the things that we're putting in our body. So in this presentation, you're going to get to kind of see, we'll break down a little bit of a protein supplement in a second, but how to choose those things for yourself. So what is protein and why is it even important? So protein is one of our three big macromolecules that we consume in food. So we consume carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And protein is composed of a building block of amino acids. And these amino acids are kind of what we're going to focus on today as our essential thing that drives every function in our body. So the specific order of these amino acids when our proteins are being created is what gives them their function and their shape. And in our body, everything is highly specific. It's really neat the more you learn about it, but noting that we don't process each macromolecule the same way. So carbohydrates, when we enter those into our mouth, they're already being digested. But protein, it has to travel a little bit further down our digestive tract in order to be digested, and it might take a couple more hours than a carb or a fat, just because they're a little bit more complex, and because they do play so many roles in our biological function, that's kind of where we're seeing that. So let's see. The various roles of protein, it can be kind of overwhelming at first when you think about it, just because it's involved in pretty much every process that you can see, whether that's structure, making reactions, transporting, regulating and coordinating, or maybe it's growth. But for structure, the thing I like to think about the most is just the visible sign that you can see. So our skin, our hair, our nails, and then obviously your frame, your skeleton. So those are really important to us. They give us protection every day, but that proteins allow us to grow back. So when we encounter injuries or when we encounter just a need for something to grow, we have that ability because of protein. So these are our collagen proteins and our keratin. I think collagen's a big one that's a supplement on the market right now. So it's about understanding kind of where we're going with that, but that it is a big one. The next thing being catalyzing reactions. So catalyze just means to kind of propel. So many proteins are functioning as enzymes. So enzymes help carry out our chemical reactions in our body. Enzymes are really essential when we're just thinking in a nutrition context because we think about our digestive system. And even just in your saliva in your mouth, enzymes are what begin our digestion. So like when we put carbs in our mouth, those are first broken down there because of enzymes. They also kind of preserve energy for us. They propel these reactions so that we don't have to use as much energy or create energy for ourselves. The next being transport. I think this is a big one. Obviously, we take oxygen in every day, and a big protein is hemoglobin. So it's a globulin protein. And essentially what it does is it takes oxygen that we breathe in and it carries it around to our tissues throughout our body, through our blood, so that we can kind of replenish there. We want oxygen to always be there so that we can be at the best functionality for ourselves. So that's a big one there. And then regulating and coordinating. So proteins, I think this one's an interesting one because before really thinking about it, it's kind of hard to imagine hormones as being a protein. You think of it as its own kind of separate thing, but that hormones that are at their foundation are proteins. And so hormones are great at signaling our body for maintenance. Our body wants to stay in a homeostatic state. So that is balance. And so we think about this as in nutrition when we have hunger or satiety from eating. our hormones are what regulate that. And so we have hormones in our body that tell us, hey, I'm kind of hungry because maybe my fat stores are a little smaller than what they need to be. And so that plays a huge role. And then they as well play a role in our immune system. And we'll get into that in a minute, but that we want to stay healthy as we age, especially even if you're on a college campus, you're around a lot of different germs every day, and we want to support ourselves. So recognizing that. And then the last one, but definitely not the least. So they are essential for growth and repair. Our body, we want it to continuously grow. And as we age, some of our cells kind of stop growing. But by propelling ourselves through nutrition, we can kind of use that as a tool to be preventative. So we want that continuous growth and we want that repair so that when we have injuries or we have surgery or something, that we're getting that immediate kind of repair. So here's a big one. This is kind of where we're going to answer that question. What even are our protein needs? So protein supports rapid muscle, bone, and brain development in kids. So that's why you see over here on this chart that children have a high density of protein per body weight in kilogram at that 0.95, as well as adolescents at 0.85. And so that larger number is just due to the growth stage that's happening there. So there's a lot of we're coming into ourselves, our hormones are changing for development, and that is kind of the central message there, why they have a increased need, but that's a good thing. And then when we get to about 20 to about 64, which is just kind of our mid-adult range, we need 0.8. And this is all backed by science and research that is kind of stating just how our body is able to regulate itself with that minimum amount. So, I mean, you can obviously supplement with more, and we'll get into the different ways or reasoning as to why you might supplement with more, but noting that that is kind of your central 0.8 grams. And then the theme of our presentation today, again, is as we age, we want to make sure that we're meeting our needs. And so older adults do have a little bit of an increased need, and that is just because our muscle stores, our lean muscle mass begins to break down as we age. A little tidbit, after about the age of 30, you have a 2 to 5% breakdown of lean muscle mass per decade, which I thought is an astonishing number to think about because, I mean, you are really young to think about that happening. So our nutrition really does matter here. It can be upwards to 8%. It just kind of, nutrition is dependent on who you are, but noting that these general recommendations will pretty much get you there what you need. So the theme of our presentation today, again, is healthy aging. So we want to support our muscle strength. We want, we have what we call sarcopenia as we age, which is just the loss of our muscle mass. But noting here that that doesn't have to be you. Like, you don't have to be a part of that statistic, and that nutrition is that tool that can kind of get us there and get us away from that statistic. It helps maintain our balance and our mobility. That's a big one as we age. It's good to do those exercises that kind of are those resistance band training, those standing on one leg. That's all important for us. We want to be able to be as stable as we can so that we're not falling or we're not injuring ourselves. And then also here, bone density. Bone density is a big one because when we think of aging, we think of our hormones begin to change. And that really is a huge influencer of our bone density right there, especially for women, that postmenopausal age where you have your estrogen hormone drops, and that kind of influences our bone density. So nutrition's a way to supplement that issue. And then after the age of 50, there's research that about 58 million Americans are at risk for bone fracture. And we just want to avoid that as much as possible, that if you do happen to fall down for whatever reason, maybe you just trip and fall, that you're not hurting yourself. And I'm pretty sure I can say for everyone that we don't want to get hurt because it slows us down. But protein kind of helps us there. And then again, that surgery, that illness, that injury, protein is a way to speed up that recovery process. So it as well supports our metabolism and our healthy weight. Our metabolism is propelled by enzymes. Again, like I said, one of the functions of protein, that's a huge one there. So just noting that this is definitely something that you want to consider. So the next little section is about immune function, our hormones, and our mental focus and cognitive health. When we were planning this presentation, kind of thought of what are some essential things that you're going to run into kind of on a daily basis, but that are also kind of hot topics right now in media. And so immune function, that's a big one. I mean, we're coming off of, post-COVID, we care about our immune system and we care about our health, but that noting that the foundation of our health is proteins. So antibodies are proteins. And so basically our body forms a natural innate response to illnesses. So, I mean, we have the images of our antibodies here, and that what they do is they circulate in their blood and they seek to neutralize out those foreign invaders. But noting that they're also essential for creating those new immune cells. So the production of cytokines. And what cytokines do is they kind of signal us, hey, there's something wrong in our body, and we want to attack that as soon as possible so that we can make sure that we remain healthy. That's kind of maintaining, again, that homeostatic, that balanced state. And then again, lastly, that illness, that injury, bouncing back from that is kind of where protein is going to be your biggest asset in your tool belt, and thinking that we can really recover. It's kind of neat that like wound healing, protein plays a role in that, and like the way that our skin heals back together. So don't discount it. It's huge in your immune system, especially when we're exposed to so many things every day. We want it to be as strong as it can be, and that our diet really can help that. So our enzyme and hormone production is a big one. So enzymes are made of proteins and they work in our body to speed up our reactions, but that they're essential in our digestion and absorption, and then especially our muscle building. And that especially in our digestion and absorption, the food we eat, we want to actually be able to use it. And so otherwise it's a waste. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. So we want these enzymes, but that our body kind of needs a little extra help at times to get those. And so making sure that we're meeting our protein needs every day, that when we do encounter these stressors that cause our body to have to work a little bit harder, we want to be able to kind of counteract that. And then again, hormones. These are messengers that are traveling between our cells to signal different reactions. It's a big one in our hunger and satiety. Your hunger hormone is this hormone called ghrelin, and then your satiety is this hormone called leptin. And so basically, they kind of work in an inverse relationship to each other, but that these hormones can get out of regulation, and they can kind of mistell us information. So it's important that our gut health is as best as it possibly can be, so that it connects to our brain in the right way, and that we don't get this dysregulated system, because we want to be able to confidently say, I am hungry and I want to eat something, instead of just being confused at times. Or maybe we don't ever get that signal. And everyone's a little different, but noting that the protein process through here is kind of essentially what's happening. So cognitive health is a big one right now. I think that especially in 2025, we're hearing a lot more research being done on cognitive health, especially as we're aging, and that what's happening here is that proteins are these precursors for our neurotransmitters, which are what's happening in our brain. So proteins also, though, when we think about eating, we want to also regulate our blood sugar. And so our brain is our biggest user of our glucose, or our sugar that we get from carbohydrates. And that protein diet, protein when we eat, like say for breakfast, we want to eat protein and a carb and a fat. We want that balanced plate, because we want to help make sure that our blood sugar is stabilized to prevent brain fog, energy crashing. Those are big ones. And I think a lot of people, especially at breakfast, we hear it as the most important meal of your day, but that really is why. It sets you up for your day, and that we want our brain and our headspace to be as clear-minded as we can, because it also gives us that longevity of energy and keeps us able to kind of continue with what we're doing without having to take a lot of breaks. So again, protein is that raw material that creates our neurotransmitters. So the amino acids that I mentioned in the beginning are from protein, and they are the precursors to these specific 3 neurotransmitters that we're going to talk about, which are serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Serotonin influences your mood and your well-being every day, but also noting that it's kind of that neurotransmitter that's talking in between our cells. And we want that. We want that communication as quickly and as possible. So if you think about a light switch, when you turn the light on, you want that to turn on immediately. We don't want any delayed reactions, and we don't want it to be any flickering. So supplementing with protein to make sure that those neurotransmitters are getting created. Dopamine is key for alertness and focus, especially during your workday. I can attest that as I get tired, like I want that alertness. So noting that your food and your diet really kind of impacts that. And then the last one, norepinephrine, is huge. It impacts our memory. So this is one of our biggest ones when we think about aging and we hear about cognitive health, lowering these risks of dementia, Alzheimer's, these kind of buzzwords that we're hearing in the media right now, but that we want to have that immediate recall of memory, that long term, that short term, because it is important for us. And as we age, protein may help preserve our cognitive function and lower the risks of these neurodegenerative diseases by meeting our needs of reproduction and growth again, because we want our body to be able to repair itself so it breaks down the bad stuff and rebuilds it good again back for us. So what are the factors that kind of change protein needs? I think we've kind of gone over this with the daily recommendations for protein being per body weight kilogram. So that's a huge one. Just noting that it might be dependent. Nutrition is not necessarily a one size fits all. We can make recommendations, but that it is necessarily special for you. And that's something that you can kind of encounter yourself. As we age, our protein needs increase, which mitigates our muscle loss, and we can support our recovery. We can bounce back faster. That is probably the biggest thing that you want to do when we're hurt. The next thing being sex. So obviously men and women, our hormones differ greatly. So different stages of life, we have like pregnancy hormones. Those are going to be totally different than just someone who's not pregnant, or postmenopausal hormones. We can't control sometimes the body's different depleted state necessarily, but with food, we can kind of mimic those hormonal states. And so we're going to get a little tidbit later with plant protein, but that is kind of a really interesting way that we can supplement food to mimic these hormones. Activity level, obviously our big athletes, our football team this weekend, like they're going to have a more protein supplementation because they're strength training every day. They're getting that impact, but it's because they're doing it every single day. And that we still need protein even if we're not going to be as active as the football team, but that activity is great for us every day. It helps our cardiovascular system, but that it also just, gets us moving, gets our joints stretched out, and it relieves stress. And that's a big one with cognitive health. So recognizing that you might have a difference, whether you're someone that's super active or just moderately active. And the last one being health conditions, dependent on who you are and if you've had surgery, or maybe you have an illness that you have an increased need. Obviously, that's something that you should talk to your doctor about, but that protein can really help you out here. And that if you've been in the hospital and you've had surgery, you might have been told that you need an increase in protein intake every day, and that is why. So protein quality, this is kind of the nitty-gritty of what you can take away from food intake. So we really care in protein, the type of protein that we're consuming. And so we want to get these essential amino acids. In nutrition world, essential means that we can't get it naturally in our body. It can't produce it itself. So we have to receive it from external sources. So we want to get the complete proteins, which are our 9 essential amino acids. So there's about 20-ish, but there's 9 that we can't produce ourselves. So these are going to come from animal proteins, such as meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy products like Greek yogurt, cheese, milk, but that you don't have to use it from animal products, that we can meet our needs too through incomplete proteins. So this is kind of debunking that myth that we started with, that plant proteins aren't good enough. They are good enough. We just have to be cognizant and intentional with how we're consuming our plant proteins. So they do lack one or more of the essential amino acids, but that we can combine them together and kind of meet those needs the same way that we could with animal proteins. So just to kind of give you a even starting ground on what I'm talking about here. So animal sources being our meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and dairy, and then our plant sources being our beans, lentils, peas, nuts, seeds, soy, and grains like quinoa. These are going to be where we're reaching our protein needs in general. And meeting our essential nutrients is going to be essential. I mean, we want to meet our protein needs, but it's the type of protein that we're getting that really truly matters, that quality. So, to get into animal protein, I just wanted to share with you some pros and cons of both plant and animal so that we can kind of combat and give you confidence when you're choosing a diet for yourself of whole foods. And so some pros we just talked about of animal protein are that they do have those complete proteins that contain the naturally all those 9 essential amino acids. They're bioavailable nutrients. Bioavailable just means that that chemical makeup of that food when it enters our body is readily available to be absorbed. We don't have to do any extra work, and it doesn't cause excess stress on our digestive system because we recognize it when we get there and we can actually use it, and that's what we want from the food that we eat. I like about animal protein, again, there's a variety of ways to eat it. There's a variety of ways to cook it, and we can season it. Seasoning is a great way to be also protective when we think about our gut health. Seasoning has great anti-inflammatory effects, but also gets rid of some of the toxins from the way that we cook foods. Some cons of animal protein being potentials for added sodium. So these can be in our processed meats, like our deli meats, or our cured meats, so like bacon, salami, prosciutto. I know I love a cheese board, but that kind of meat there. High in saturated fat. Saturated fat can, in high quantity, can be detrimental to our cardiovascular health. So we want to think about that. If you're someone that's concerned about your cholesterol, you kind of want to limit these saturated fats. And so like in red meat, that is going to be that marbled look to it. That white is that saturated fat. It's essentially what's solid at room temperature. So our butters, our margarines, things like that sort. There is an environmental impact to our animal protein in the way that we have to process this. I don't know if you guys have ever been around a chicken plant, but they don't smell great. And so there's an air quality risk there. And then just thinking about the processing. And then lastly, animal sources are a little bit more pricey when you consider them in comparison to plant sources. So if that's something you're concerned with, we can work through that, but that's just something to note here. So I love plant protein because it's kind of the underdog of our presentation here. So plant protein, while we say it has those incomplete proteins, it's high in fiber, it's high in antioxidants and phytonutrients. So fiber, if you're concerned about your cholesterol, fiber is a great one to help lower that cholesterol. It kind of fights against those fats in our body and also regulates our hunger cues in a way. It regulates the type of food that we end up craving because we are a little bit more satisfied. Antioxidants, so these are created by what we call secondary plant metabolites. And so these are when our plants go under stress when they're growing. So this can be drought, whatever, but that these are really great for us. Antioxidants are anti-inflammatory. Our body naturally has anti-inflammatory states, but that eating just vegetables and fruits can counteract that. Obviously, they're low in saturated fat and cholesterol free, which is a great one if you're worried about your cholesterol or just overall heart health. They're environmentally sustainable. That's a big one. And then we can still form those complete proteins, but it's about pairing those. And so a little bit later, we'll get into pairing these proteins. But example is rice and beans. That's a good one. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people really enjoy, but that you can meet those needs. Some cons, obviously, those incomplete on their own, and that you might have to do a little bit more planning to be intentional about it, but that there are solutions for you. And then just because there is a little bit more fiber we can't necessarily absorb, but it does help our digestive tract. And so it's lower bioavailability, but you do have so many benefits elsewhere with our antioxidants, our phytonutrients. Those are our like pigments in our food that don't have caloric density, but they do have benefits for us overall. So this is a little interesting fact when we're talking about hormones and protein regulation. If you're a pretty average healthy person, you don't have any health risks, soy protein is a great consideration for you. So soy has these components called isoflavones, and they mimic the hormone estrogen in their shape. So estrogen in our body, naturally, when we have it at its normal rate, relaxes our blood vessels so that our blood can flow easier. So that's going to have a lower blood pressure. We reduce our inflammation and we prevent our LDL, which is our plaque-forming cholesterol, from getting oxidized. And so oxidation in our body or any stress like that is what's going to cause us problems. And so we want to, make sure that we stick to a diet that is going to kind of prevent that for us, because it's things that are innately happening in us that we can't control otherwise. So soy protein, awesome one for you. So, like I said at the beginning, in this protein craze, we hear a lot about protein supplements in the media and everything. And I kind of want to just compare them for you real quickly to a whole food, like a plant source, just so that you can understand, weigh the pros and cons of both. So supplements have a tendency to be kind of pricey at times. And that's because of the branding can be different dependent on where they're sold. It can be different dependent on whether they're backed by research that they're safe. Proteins will have supplements will have shelf-stable ingredients. I don't know if you've ever looked at a supplement bottle at the date, but a lot of times they're going to be good for like over a year. So those ingredients that they're putting in there are so that they do last us for a long time. So, I mean, maybe that's a consideration. Maybe that's a pro or con for you. It's up to you. Plant and animal options for supplement protein. That's an awesome one for you, whether you're vegetarian or vegan, whatever that might look like. They're quick and convenient because we can just add water, add milk, and then high protein content per serving. Obviously, some protein supplements, we're about to get into that, might not have that, but that we want that high protein content if a supplement is what you're considering. And then whole foods, we have a wide range of prices with plants because, I mean, we can buy in bulk, we can buy fresh fruits and veggies, and it's about being cognizant of where they're coming from, but that we do have that wide range of prices if that's something that you're concerned about. They're readily available nutrients that our body can process. So comparing that supplement being those shelf-stable ingredients, those are a little bit harder for us to process. So having that readily available and those extra benefits that those antioxidants, those are great. There's a variety of color, texture, and ways to consume them. And then again, similar to our animal protein before, but we can season our plant proteins. We can have a lot of health benefits from seasoning, obviously being cognizant of our sodium, because sodium in our cardiovascular system, our blood pressure can kind of affect that, but that we can reap the benefits of this. And just some takeaways so that you kind of just get what I'm saying here is that protein supplements can have a complex blend of ingredients, and they might require a little bit more processing in our body to really reap those benefits. And then whole food sources are a little bit more bioavailable or readily absorbable, and we can use them a little bit quicker and more efficiently. So this is a fun little activity, and we do have a question in the chat about if you are a supplement user, what do you look for in choosing your protein powder? And I'm going to get into kind of some recommendations of what you should look for if you've never considered that. But that if you want to answer that while I go over this, that would be awesome. So I wanted to include this because, again, the grocery store is really overwhelming when we see these supplements. I mean, where are they coming from? Why are there so many different brands? So I use the plant-based one because I think plant-based supplements usually are a little bit cleaner in ingredients. And so the first thing you should look for is a short ingredient list. We want to be able to pronounce those words that we're reading because that is kind of a big one. When we read the back of packages and nutrition labels, oftentimes we don't recognize them. And so we want to look at that. That third-party certification, and then that is a big one. So the FDA does not regulate supplements. And so they can essentially have anything in them and we might not know it. So it is being cognizant about that sourcing, where that's coming from, if this is something you're considering. So these little pictures are little reputable sources of people that I know NSF for Sports Certified is like a nonprofit organization that will test supplements and kind of tell you if they have steroids in them, if they have any opioids, or if they're somehow in the processing laced with any heavy metals. And this little tool I've linked to the bottom, and I think you all will receive this PowerPoint, is a link to the Department of Defense. And it's a checklist that you can kind of go through with your supplement to help you decide whether or not you think it's a great one. I think the last thing being here is that we get a high percentage of protein per scoop. There is no point of buying a protein supplement and wasting your money on something super expensive if you're not getting that protein density, because if it is meeting the needs of actual food in between for some reason for you, we want to make sure that we're actually meeting those needs and not just getting a bunch of sugar or fats there. So some strategies to increase our protein intake. Now, I think this can be kind of different for everyone, and what works for us is going to be different dependent on our age, because again, with our hormones changing as we age, our hunger cues change as well. And so we want to still make sure that we're meeting our needs and even our increased needs, but that a good rule of thumb that you can do is using a fist method when snacking. I like to use this because this encourages you to use like real whole foods. So one fist can represent a 1 cup serving. So you could do like a fistful of Greek yogurt and then some fruit with that, and that can be a little snack for you. So you're reaping that animal benefit, but then you get a little fruit for some of those antioxidant benefits as well from plants. Eating protein first at meals, this is a huge one. So often we reach for on our plate, and I have a little plate picture on this slide, but we reach for those carbohydrates first. And those carbohydrates, they taste great, but they fill us up kind of fast sometimes. And then we're going to get that blood sugar spike and that crash quicker because they digest faster. So we want to eat our protein first so that we're meeting our protein needs. And then once we're done with our protein, then we can go about the rest of our plate. And again, here we want to worry about too, what is our portion sizing? So about like a 4-ounce serving is about that recommendation of like an animal protein. I know there's a lot of people and media attention on like a carnivore diet, but we really want to think about how much animal protein or plant protein that we're consuming in a sitting. Having protein with every meal and snack is going to make sure that you disperse it throughout the day and that you're meeting those needs. So like I just said, spreading it out is kind of really your best bet. Starting at that breakfast, you already start your blood sugar off the way it should, and then we can have our cognitive health be better throughout the day. Aiming for about 25 to 30 grams of protein at each meal is kind of really important here. There is research stating that anything where you kind of are over consuming at one meal doesn't necessarily do anything better for you. So sometimes when we overload our system in our body, we just kind of get rid of it and we don't use it. So don't waste your money. Like, don't try to overeat at one meal of protein because one, it's going to probably make you a little bit uncomfortable digestively, but also we want to be able to use that. The next thing being protein before bed for nighttime repair. A small protein-rich snack can actually help you with cell and tissue repair as we sleep. So when we sleep, we're not putting stress on our muscles and our joints or anything. And so our body can actually go in and repair those. And so we want those signaling molecules to be able to tear down the bad stuff and rebuild it back again fresh for us. And then the next day, we're going to have more stable energy. And then we're also going to have maintained strength as we age because we are repairing ourselves as we go. And then additionally, you're probably not going to have as high sugar craving in the morning because you did go to bed with that balanced blood sugar. So protein's necessary to support our biological function, but we do need variety in our diet. So a way that you can think about this is there's a variety of ways you can do it, but here's some suggestions. So protein and complex carbs. So complex carbs are more of our whole foods, so our whole grains, things that aren't as processed. And those are going to be better for our blood sugar overall, where we can actually get benefits from these. So carbs help fuel your muscles and their brain, while the protein slows down the digestion, so we keep energy steady throughout the day. Protein and healthy fats. When we eat plants, they do have benefits of vitamins, like I've mentioned, but that these vitamins sometimes are what we call fat soluble. So we need fats to help us digest these vitamins. And we definitely want these vitamins. So vitamin A is great for eye health. Vitamin D is great for your bone health. E is an anti-inflammatory, and K is good for blood clotting. So we definitely want these things when we think about maintenance of our body. The last one being protein and veggies. Vegetables are adding our fiber, which is great for cholesterol, like I mentioned, antioxidants, and then vitamins that provide nutrients to us that protein alone can't do, or carbs. So some examples I had for you over here are just some simple ones, but feel free to make your plate as colorful as possible. There's really just so many limitless ways that you can do that, but that chicken with quinoa, you're getting that animal protein and that plant protein together, that grain. We're getting tofu with brown rice. We're getting that soy cardiovascular benefit. It's not just about our muscles, but it's also about the blood flow. And we're getting that complex carb with brown rice. Salmon with avocado, so that's our fats. Eggs with olive oil. Thinking about cooking, we really want to kind of cook with an extra virgin olive oil rather than a more saturated like vegetable or canola oil. And then lastly, eggs with sauteed peppers or spinach. Eggs are going to give you that protein and fat content, but then peppers are really great for vitamin C, and then spinach got that vitamin A. It's a leafy green, so it's great for our eye health. So I wanted to make it easy and affordable, accessible for you guys. So you can buy in bulk. We can buy these dried beans, dried lentils. We can buy dried quinoa. I mean, you can go to stores and buy meat in bulk. And noting that if you did that and you didn't want to use it all at once, freeze it. Don't let it go to waste. Freeze it, thaw it out for the next time. And that canned meat is also an option for you, and it can be a little bit cheaper than that fresher meat, but that tuna or salmon is high in protein content, and that salmon is high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are also great for our cardiovascular health and preventing that bad cholesterol from plaque building, that LDL that we talked about earlier. And then literally, if there is no availability in foods, or you might run into where you just don't have the time in the day, then you can consider protein supplements like our powders. But that there are just so many benefits from eating the whole foods and the animal proteins that we do really want to reap the benefits from, even if they might not be calorically the same way as the protein supplement. So some barriers that you might encounter in protein intake are that decreased appetite and taste change. As we age, our appetite cues do change. Is our hormonal balance changing? Our taste changes are, I think some people say it's like every 7 years, but we do kind of crave different things. Things can kind of start to taste different for us. So it's about finding what you think is going to be best for you. Reduced energy needs. Some of that's just based on activity level, but noting here that that doesn't have to be you. You can still maintain activity as best as possible, and that's always going to be great for you. Chewing and swallowing difficulties. So maybe we opt for mashing up beans or a plant source of protein rather than eating the animal source, because we can change that texture and that consistency so that we can combat those issues. Cost or access, we kind of just hit on that. Buying in bulk is a great way. We have a lack of knowledge sometimes of what to choose at the store. We're not as confident. Digestive concerns. Maybe you've had some kind of surgery that prevents you from absorbing certain nutrients, so you might have to consider supplementation of something, but that we do want to try to get that from food first. And then limited time or cooking skills. And then lastly, medication interactions. This is kind of a sneaky one that some people might not realize, but the medications and the food that we eat sometimes interact and counteract each other. So not that you have to forego either one, but that we have to be cognizant of the timing that we're doing both. So how do we overcome it? You can drink your protein between meals if you're concerned about meeting those needs. There's a lot of options out there. Small, frequent meals, this is probably the go-to for pretty much anything that you might have going on, because our body is going to be able to digest that protein and that meal at that time, and it's going to be easier. And then we're going to also get hungry again for that next meal, and it's going to have that regulated blood sugar throughout the day. And that is kind of going to give you the best, most stabilized energy, and also offer your body the nutrients that it needs and make it consistent. Finding what works best for you. I know I mentioned in the beginning that nutrition is not one size fits all. Nutrition can be personal and individualized, but that these are just general recommendations to meet our needs. And then lastly, recognizing that there's a variety of plant and animal sources, and especially plant, when we see those things that might not be calorically dense, but that when you look for your diet, aim for a variety of both, but make that conscious effort to increase the plant sources. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, but that there's strengths to both of them when we're thinking about our health. So just some key takeaways. We have our protein needs increasing as we age to counter that muscle loss. We support muscle strength, bone density, and mobility by having protein in our diet. It's vital for immune function and fast recovery. Timing matters. We want to not overload our system, and we want to make sure that we have energy to continue throughout our day. Balancing meals by pairing protein with complex carbs, with fats and veggies. And then plant and animal proteins both have their benefits, and that we want to meet those essential amino acid needs, whether it is combining the two or having just animal or just the plant, we can meet those needs. And then lastly, we can overcome a lot of barriers by these small frequent meals, because they're not as daunting if we don't have that high appetite. So the last little section I have for you guys is just some recipes, and I do have a QR code and a link on the next page if you want to open them up. But that Liz in my group has tried the sheet pan chicken fajitas, and she really likes it because it is super easy to prep, cook, and then also you're getting those veggies and you're getting those proteins, and you can even get those carbs in through a tortilla if you're opting for that. Or we can do brown rice. You know, we can kind of mix and match things, but that also, if you don't like doing dishes, this is a great option for you. And then black bean soup. This one is plant-based. And I mean, you could make it animal-based if you want, just changing the ingredients a little bit, but that this is an easy prep for you if you want to take lunch with you somewhere, and less time consuming. Again, not that many dishes that you have to do because we can put it all in one pot and kind of cook it up for ourselves. So there's the little recipe ideas. And while y'all are able to do that, if anyone has any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them at this time. But thank you for listening. Seeing any questions?
No questions yet. I think there was a lot of good answers to the protein question about which protein powders y'all are using. A lot of you were looking at the right thing, so good job.
I know Consumer Reports just came out with stuff recently, but yeah, just finding those reputable sites online can be simple, but we often just forget about it. So looking for those sources is important because the FDA doesn't regulate those. And so we do want to be cognizant of what we are putting in our body, just so that we eliminate any extra stress that it has to do that. What are your favorite protein bars and shakes? I don't have necessarily a favorite. I mean, I try to aim for using food first mentality, but I do know that sometimes we run into those issues. I know if you are supplementing with protein, it often is that density that I mentioned. So I know Quest bars are one that I've tried. They have that, and they've been tested, and they have relatively pretty clean ingredients. Plant-based protein, like I mentioned, is going to be a little bit better at times. But yeah, I've tried the Bearbells. I've heard different ways to pronounce it, Bearbells. But yeah, I mean, it is really about, there's so many different options that are great. It is about just being able to confidently read that ingredient list and trust that you make that decision for yourself. But that, yeah, I mean, we do have to sometimes supplement with that. And that it's more important that we're just meeting our needs the best possible way that we can. Yeah, Kind bars for breakfast. That's a big one. Yeah. The Owen brand. I have
that one.
I just did. I said about the Consumer Reports. I think that they did just come out with one about the trace of heavy metals, and they tested Owen, and I'm pretty sure it was one of the ones that was safe or things. So yeah, I have heard of that one. But yeah, that's a great one. Go look up online. There's all kinds of people that